Hi, my name is Evelyn Vanderhoop. I'm a haida from Haida. I was born and raised in Alaska, but my mother's village and my mother's place and people are from Haida, and I live here now in Masset. My Haida name is Kajuth, and I am a weaver. I switched from being a professional watercolor artist to being a professional weaver. And it was my mother who mentored me. My mother is Dolores Churchill, and she's a master weaver. My mother, she does some really creative things with her weaving. So anyway, it was exciting to be her apprentice and her being mentored by her. And I'm also consider Cheryl Samuel my mentor. Sometimes when there was problems, I could call Cheryl, and sometimes I could call my mother. But sometimes I couldn't reach them because they were both active people in the arts, and here, there, they're teaching, they're lecturing. So really, I was determined. I was like, I'm going to learn Nahin. I'm going to learn this Chilkat technique. Now, these robes traditionally are a combination of men and women that they combine their artistic roles in this art. Usually back then it was men did this, they carved canoes, they did that. And then women wove, and they didn't paint or they didn't carve, they had their roles. But in that art, the men painted cedar boards, and you only needed half because they were bilateral, so that if you painted one half, you knew what was going to happen on the other half. So, and they only painted it in black paint. So it was up to the woman to know how the colors were placed traditionally. So they would come up with a pattern board for the weaver, and then the weaver would spin and weave. And it was up to the women to create that form line in wool. The raven's tail are earlier textiles that they believe evolved from the basketry techniques. And when you weave them, you weave in one direction, which is like weaving a hat or a basket, always one direction, right? Well, in the Nahin weaving, the techniques let you create these ovoids, these circles, because color areas have interlock joins and step joins. And those interlock and step joins are smoothed over by a technique of three-strand braiding. So it's quite complex, although the stepping stones, the basic techniques, are not really harder than the raven's tail twining techniques. You just need to have experience forming those forms, those shapes. And so it's been a wonderful journey learning the Nahin, researching its history, and just loving what I'm doing. It all is very exciting to be part of the continuation of a traditional art. And now I pass these things to my children. So my oldest daughter, Carrie Ann Vanderhoop, is an excellent weaver of this art, and she's often my assistant to some of my big projects. She'll help me out. And my younger daughter, Tiffany Amber Vanderhoop, is an excellent weaver of both of these styles of weaving. So both of them are keeping the arts alive, and I feel like, just like my mother and my grandmother, I feel like a bridge for these traditional arts to move further on to the younger generation. So I want to talk briefly about what I'll be covering in this instructional video. I'm first going to talk about the cedar and the respect that we give the cedar, and then I will show you how to prepare the cedar for the textiles, and then I will show you the spinning of the warp. We use the cedar in our warp for the Nahin, and it requires special ways of treating that cedar that are different than basketry, and so that's an important lesson to learn. I'm also going to, like I said, spin both the warp that has just the wool, and then I will show you how to spin it with the cedar, and then I'll also show you how to splice, because it's important when we're working with big robes that we have a continuous ball of warp so that we can cut it in the proper way. So I'll show you how to do splicing in that spinning of the warp. So I'm going to go off to show you the cedar. Every spring, we go out into the woods to gather. We know that it's time to gather when the salmon berry blossoms come out, and then we know that the sap will be running and it will be easier to take the bark off the tree. So we use yellow cedar because it is more pliable, it's sappier, and that might be the reason why it's more pliable, but the red cedar snaps easy and is not as flexible as the yellow cedar. So it's the yellow cedar that we use for the textiles. So we go out and we want to make sure that the tree is the right size. We also want to make sure that it's straight, that the bark runs straight up that tree. It doesn't twist, and we make sure that there's no limbs. There could be lots of limbs on cedar trees. So we thank the tree. We make sure that every tree we gather from, we thank, and we let the tree know what we have in store for its bark, how we will use the bark. That's a very important thing, and it's usually no big ceremony. It's a quiet thank you and an assurance that we're going to use this and it will go into the future in our art. We go out of the forest with a bundle, and then I usually at home re-wet this bundle and then put it in a size that will fit into a pot. Yellow cedar is found way up on lumber roads. It likes the top of mountains, and in Washington State, when I used to live there, my cousin and I, Lisa Telford, we'd go way up on high, narrow timber roads. But anyway, in Alaska, it's often called Alaskan cedar because it does like the cooler weather, and it's going further up north as the weather warms down here. It's actually becoming, yellow cedar is becoming endangered because of global warming. But anyway, I'll show you a few photos of how I put it in the my glass container, and I steeped it a day and a half, and so I put the coils in, and then I wait and I watch to see how those cadmium layers just puff out when it's ready. And so it's pretty dramatic. You keep watching, and then when the water gets really dark, then you dump that water outside, and then you put fresh water in there. A lot of times with spruce root you want rainwater or distilled water, but when it comes to preparing the yellow cedar for clothing, you really don't have to use distilled water. So at the final, then you take it out and you cool it, and then you're going to split it into real fine pieces, like as small as a blade of grass, as long as you can possibly get it. That's how thin you want to split it. So you take a unserrated knife, a little paring knife, and you're just going to take and slice it. I've brought up a little bit of that fiber. So then I'm going to take and I'm going to roll down the strip. And split it as long as you can. Keep the material moist. Let me get you closer. Keep the material moist so that it continues to be workable. Okay, and oftentimes people will even like just mangle it up and then the fibers split up like that. And those fibers can be taken and peeled off. We often call the cedar trees our sister. They're our sisters, and so there's a lot of respect for those trees. And they never go back to the same tree. You harvest a tree, you thank it, you harvest it, and you wish it well, and you hope it grows another 100 years. I hope that people who use the cedar will have those protocols and that respect for the tree. It's our resources, and it's been our traditional resources forever. It's living and life. And there's so many stories I've read where the cedar, if a hero was in the course of his adventure, someone dies, there's been where the person puts the cedar, a mat or a cedar cape over someone, and that will restore the people. So I think that we've always recognized that cadmium layer is where the life of the tree, it receives its nutrients and all it needs through the bark. And so with that, knowing that it's a rejuvenating material, and so we've always valued it. There's a lot of healing that can happen with cedar in all its uses and stuff. And so anyway, in talking about how we use this yellow cedar with clothing, I definitely want to emphasize the respect. Okay, so I have some strands of my working warp. So I'm using a roving that I call finger roving, and it comes out with the very thin strands of already cleaned and brushed roving that has no spin to it, no ply to it, and in order to produce a warp that is about, I think this warp is probably about 10 ends per inch. It's, a larger warp would be 8 ends per inch, and a thinner warp would be 12 ends per inch. But this one appears to be that it's 10 ends per inch. And so for that size, I'm using 3 of those finger roving, and on the other side 3 also. So So just to show you how to spin, I'm going to wet those, and I'm wetting the material. Okay, so I've got the 2 plies pretty far up on my thigh, and I take my hand, and one will be close to that first knuckle of the fingers, and the next one is widely divided, and that's up on the last knuckle of that finger. So I roll it down my thigh, and I don't let them wrap up on each other. Then I release the pinch, and then you'll see that it rolls up on each other into a Z spin. Right? So then I'm going to do that again. And there it is, and I release it, and it then wraps up on each other into a Z spin. So that is the basic movement. So I have a warp going here, and with this I'll show you how we work with the cedar in it. So the cedar, when it dries out, gets quite stiff, and so before you work with the cedar, you want to moisten it so that it gets soft and pliable. Okay, so I've loosely wrapped them along with the wool. Give it a little bit of a twist. And do the same thing as we did without the cedar. We're going to pinch it, and then take your hand, and with them widely separated, roll it down your thigh. Don't let them wrap up on each other. Then release the pinch, and then you're going to get the Z twisted yarn. So a lot of times people will roll it up the thigh so that it will tighten the spin. Now, if you run out of yarn, then you need to splice. So in this instance right now, the cedar has gotten too thin on one side. So I will want to add more cedar. So I take a thin piece of cedar and just lay it out next to the shorter piece of cedar, and then again spin it, twist it a little bit so it's likely to wrap easy. So roll it down your thigh. Don't let it wrap upon each other. The 2 plies should stay separate. Then on pinch, and then roll up. Now you're going to get sometimes a little flag there, and you can trim that later. So don't worry if your cedar pops up like that. And let's see, pretty soon I'm going to be running out of the wool. And so I'll show you how to add the wool. Like right now, I've got a lot of cedar here, but I need more wool. So here is an extension of the wool. And so I just lay it on top alongside, give it a little bit of a twist, and then roll it down my thigh. Don't let those twist up on each other. And then release the pinch, and it will create that Z twist. Roll it up the thigh, and you see there is no flag in regards to that wool. So, so roll it, let it release it, and then roll it up. That is the process. So now we would have, I have the balls of the wonderful warp. And so the next stage is that I will be measuring.
How do den kadli alla yahoo alla Gwayutsku slife dugan ka nadi gudang nai ka nadi gudang nai alla yahoo alla yahoo alla yahoo alla yahoo alla yahoo alla yahoo alla how do gan kadli us alla yahoo alla Gwayutsku slife dugan ka nadi gudang nai ka nadi gudang nai. Woo!